So, good evening, everyone. Thank you, or good afternoon, and thank you for your patience. We had a few minor technical difficulties because I'm operating out of Australia. So what I'd like to cover today is, well, the heading first, there are three kinds of lies: lies, damn lies, and statistics. And the interesting thing is that when you look up this quotation, no one actually seems to know whose quotation it is. It gets attributed to a number of people, including Mark Twain and the Prime Minister Benjamin Disraeli. So I went looking for a better quotation. I came up with one from the philosopher Plato, who says a good decision is based on knowledge and not on numbers. And that kind of summarizes what I want to cover today. As you can see with this little character on the slide here, typical politician's got his fingers crossed, and the statistics clearly show. Well, it seems to me from recent experience that the statistics can clearly show anything you like. And that's what we'll have a look at today. So my key takeout from today is don't believe the numbers. Always question them if you want them to be useful to you. So what caused this webinar? Well, I work with the ISBSG. I was very fortunate in being able to work with people involved in the industry across the world. Last year, I went with Don Reefer, and who's a consultant, benchmarking estimation guy on the west coast of the USA, and very well thought of consultant. And Don suggested that we produce a joint report on software productivity benchmarks, which we did, and I'll come to more details soon. And it was after that, in dealings with Capers, Jones, and Don, that there was again a joint suggestion, and I don't know who I can blame for this one, that we should now produce a report, 3 sources of data covering the impact of software size on productivity, which was an area of interest. And we did. And what has happened is that this webinar has come out of my experience from that particular, or those 2 exercises. The objective today is to highlight for you and explain just how important it is to understand the data you're working with, whether it's been provided to you as a benchmark report or whether you've got data that you want to use for estimation. But the important thing is understand the data, question how the data was actually arrived at, and how the results were arrived at that you're looking at in your report or that you want to use for your estimation. This can go, as it's obvious from my comments, way beyond benchmark reports. Some of the issues are relevant to estimation. All issues are relevant to data collection, if you're collecting your own data. Issues are relevant to data analysis. Please don't be put off by the length of the agenda. I just wanted to get everything in and put on one page the issues, along with ideas and recommendations. I promise you'll still be home in time for your dinner. 2 reports that this was done. The first was a report called Software Productivity Benchmarks, which are in the ISBSG produced. I was the person that was pulling it all together, but the ISBSG analyst is Dr. Chris Loken. So I'm not responsible, this isn't a get out, I'm just making the point that Chris does most of the work, responsible for the actual statistical analysis as such. I just tried to make sense of the data that we were getting from 2 sources. The second report, a few months later, was the impact of software size on productivity. A very interesting report in its own right, as to exactly what does happen to productivity on smaller or larger projects. 3 organizations cooperated, Capers Jones, Don Reefer, and the ISBSG. This slide you can see the different companies. If you do want to buy a copy of the reports, go to isbsg.com, which I've got on a later slide. That's their shop where you can buy reports. So, most of you are aware of, you may well be aware of Don's company, and I think most people are aware of Capers' company, which is now Namcook Analytics. So I won't go into detail there. So my initial enthusiasm for this idea of joint reports swung into some confusion. It just simply wasn't as easy as I'd first expected. And the first challenge was this, that when I got the data, I was looking at it. I was advertising as the picture. Explains what we're talking about. We compare apples and apples. We had all sorts of fruit in the basket. So I'll quickly explain what we've got on this slide. We've got the sources of data, and I've just taken some of the major fields. So for the ISBSG uses unadjusted function points. Reefer uses lines of code, and then for some of this report backfired to adjusted function points. The second report, Caper's data, was adjusted function points. So we've already got 3 different sources of size. Tasks, which are the simple tasks that are involved in a project, for example, first of all, preparation, then analysis and specification, design, build, test, implement. The ISBSG used 6 tasks generally. Likewise with Don. Capers went to a much finer level of granularity, as we'll see later. Came to our reports, ISBSG favors medians, and the median is the middle number. If you have a data set of 101 data points and projects, whatever, then 51 is your median. That project is the median project, and its value is used. Don prefers to use averages, and Capers use nation depending on the report, so it's a hybrid. You can see, I won't go through each one of these so slowly, but in our costs we have the ISBSG, sorry about the ISBSG has data from all over the world, and therefore its costs are in multiple currencies. The other 2 use US dollars because that's where their data come from. ISBSG reports in the first 30 days of operation. So, we're lucky to get that data, but we do get that data for the first 30 days of operation, and we report per function points, the number of defects per 1,000 function points. Don uses lines of code, uses different things, and is ongoing. He uses function points, but ongoing for a longer period of time. So as you can see, there's an awful lot of differences that we have to address looking at data. And if you had received data for any one of these 3 sources or a report, then you could get quite a different view. The repositories, the ISBSG data is available to anyone, whereas naturally, because of the source, the Reefer data and the Jones data is private. The people that give them the data don't allow them to make it available. So this challenge of the data, just some other things that occurred when I started to look at the data, we had to work out which applications we actually had data for that were common. So in the first report, we could settle on automation, scientific, telecommunications, web, IT type, and defense. And then there were other applications that Don Reefer had